if a customer is unwilling to pay for assessment, chances of you selling managed service agreement are near
It's
zero.
not going to happen. Hey, welcome to Business Technicalities. I'm Brett Chittum with Lawrence Technology Services and Lawrence Systems, and I'm here with.
Jason Slago from CNWR, back from vacation.
Yeah, you were having some fun, some excitement, and potential injuries, and just wow, the whole gamut of things.
I learned to ski. You can take from that what you will.
Well, let me ask you. I mean, in learning to ski, did you enjoy it? How about that?
Oh yeah, very much so. Injury aside, I am by no means retired from skiing. I will ski
Right.
again. I want to try skiing with the better snow conditions because it was like in the 50s up there, even in
Mhm.
the mountain Breckenridge, and not at 10,000 foot altitude. So maybe I'm dying a little bit less.
Well, I mean, when it's that way, you get icy conditions, and it's
Yep.
harder to plow and slow
Yep.
yourself down, and things
Yeah. And
happen. So,
I'm a big guy, right? Like, so, they teach you to like pizza, right? Like, you go like eat
hmm
a French fry pizza. It's not enough. I can't pizza enough to stop myself when I move with any speed at all because I'm so big. So yeah,
that
it's fun.
inertia, it's come on,
Yeah, yeah.
what
What is
what
it?
will what stays
F
in
equals
motion will
ma. Yeah,
yeah, Newton's three laws of motion
yeah.
or whatever. Yeah, that's right. Um, so I guess we're to yeah, all right.
We should
Precursor
talk about
here.
how we got here. Yeah.
Yeah, precursor here. I have been bothering Jason because on our end, we're talking about doing assessments on clients before you actually send them a quote. And as a sales guy, I've got to say, um, why are you selling assessments and quoting assessments over quoting an actual managed service product?
Yep.
And so I guess we're going to start with what is the first thing? Are they required? Well, for you,
Yeah.
obviously they are, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. So yeah, to a little more color. Some of the topics that we discuss here, right? Like Brett, Lawrence Systems, they're about 45 minutes north of here, and so we've been kind of chatting on and off about various things. And so Brett will call me up with uh, these deals that we're kind of co-working together, and we've
hmm
got one right now where we're trying to sell the guy the assessment, and Brett's like, "Why aren't you selling him managed services?" And I'm like, "This is a great topic to talk about." This is where you got this is technicalities. So here we are. But yes, we require we generally require some sort of paid assessment before I will
hmm
quote any managed services deals, which is I will admit it is definitely sometimes contentious. We hear a lot of like, "Why am I paying you for a quote?" kind of arguments. But we can talk. We can kind of go through how we got there. I presume you do not require them, and you will gladly quote managed services without them.
Yeah, but I mean, we will do a rumble scan. We will take a
Mhm.
look at things. But we try. I'm trying to get the client onboarded, and I think part of
Yeah.
I was talking with Matt in your office, and he was saying that, well, what happens when you find this? What happens when you find that? Well, we have a
Yeah.
discussion with the client, and then we move on and take care of that too. And sometimes it adds extra, sometimes it does not. Most of the time, it adds a little more, but I'm just trying to get to that point of, okay, I got to build trust with this client and do something. And once I do the quote, get things in there. And I think part of it is when we find something that maybe they didn't tell us they had, then I think it helps them to really truly believe that we are doing what we say we're going to do.
Yeah. So so I totally get that. And I think some of that comes down to the differences in the way we operate, right? So it's like
Mhm.
when we do a managed services deal, they're typically all you can eat labor, right? Like,
Right.
so we typically don't charge hourly labor other than the standard move at change deletes, right? So like project
Right.
labor or even labor, like, new workstation or whatever, we tend to
hmm
charge that labor as part of the sale of the equipment, or if
Yep.
they buy it elsewhere, we charge them to do the work to prep it. But generally, almost all the labor and all the help desk and all the stuff like that is included. Additionally, we tend to fix scope the onboarding and fix scope the remediation project, right? So we tend to, or
Right.
these days, our managed services quotes have three components, and some of them have optional steps, right? So it's like, here's the monthly managed services cost, here's what the onboarding cost, which typically, unless it's super complicated, we'll try to hold. on a term deal, right? So either on a
Right.
1 or a 3 year deal, we'll hold that to typically 1 month service. We
Mhm.
tend to lose money on it. We tend to overrun the number of hours based on our bill rate. We tend to overrun that and assume that we'll make it up during the term of the managed services
Right.
agreement.
Right.
And then the last component, this is relatively new. We used to bundle the onboarding in the remediation project, but now we've separated them just so we can close the onboarding project and start doing technical business reviews with them, because we don't do any business reviews till their onboarding project's done. Like the last step of the onboarding project is to have their first business review with them.
Right.
And remediation, sometimes hardware lead times are long, sometimes things are just not great, so it takes a while to kind of sort through those things. So the third part of it tends to be remediation project.
Right.
We tend to fix scope those things, right? So it's like, this is just how much it's going to cost. And I think that some of the difference is you tend to T&M them, correct?
Right.
Like time and materials. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
from your perspective, it doesn't matter then, right? From my perspective, it matters a lot, because if the scope of the remediation project, the onboarding ends up way, way higher than what I had quoted for, then I really lose a lot of money. Whereas on your side, it's mostly time and material, so it doesn't matter as much.
So could you, I mean, when thinking about it, so obviously for you, they're required. You do them. That's a non-negotiable. Is there a potential in looking at what you're doing to make a potential? Okay, so I'm not closing a lot of managed service things because I'm not getting through that initial assessment quote. Is that happening at all?
I mean, a little bit. We definitely get some cases where the client comes to us and they're like, "Well, I'm not going to charge you. I'm not going to pay you to give me a quote." And
Right.
here's the deal, right? Like, we used to do free assessments, right? I'd run a rapid fire tools scan and I'd give them the fear report, like, "You've got 8,000 fear units worth of problems in your network," and then I would withhold all the details, right? So it's like they can't really, the report I gave them, the free report I gave them, isn't actionable, right? Like, it's
Right.
so basically it's like, everything sucks, and you'll have to pay me to fix it. I'm not going to tell you why it sucks. It just sucks. And you know what? I hate that. You want to be a used car salesman, like, then hand somebody a non-actionable thing saying that everything's terrible, doesn't give them any information about how to fix it, and then basically holds them hostage to you to come in and save the day. I mean, that's just a terrible thing.
Well, I get that in some respects when you do that. I mean, if you're telling them everything's messed up and only I can fix it, you should actually probably say, "Hey, what we found was this, and we
Yeah.
found this."
Yeah, some of it comes down to, I mean, a lot of it comes down to just time, right? So when we were
Mhm.
doing the free assessments, uh, our goal was to get in and out of there and get the report to the client
Yeah.
on the client's network for maybe an hour, and then another half hour to generate the report out of rapid fire tools, and we were done,
Hmm.
right? But that's not, it's not great, right? Like, I would typically have a
Right.
sales resource do the scan, rapid fire tool scan. A tech resource was really not involved at all,
Okay.
and so that's kind of how we pivoted. Is that it just wasn't a good experience for anybody.
Let me ask you, how detailed are you with your assessments then?
Uh, they are. Let me pull a couple of recent ones we've done up here. They tend to be 8 to 10 pages long.
Hmm.
They tend, and they're very actionable, right? So they actually tend to be longer than 8 to 10 pages. They tend to be 8 to 10 pages, and then the full. We actually use PlexTrack, which is security, like reporting and
Hmm.
vulnerability analysis platform. We actually use PlexTracks to do them, and we've
Okay.
kind of co-opted it to be able to do both the security piece of it and general IT recommendations.
Okay.
Uh, at the end of the document, we do include all of the Nessus findings, because I use Nessus
Hmm.
as part of the scan, which is a industry accepted vulnerability
Yep.
scanner, and I include the full report of all findings at the end of it, and that has to be about 3,000 pages long.
Oh, jeez.
But the actionable part of the actual assessment piece of it is, somewhere in the 8 to 10 pages.
Mhm.
What we tend to do is, we run a scan of the environment, using not just Nessus. We use a handful of other tools to
Mhm.
get an idea of, what's on the network, the age of things, patch status of things. We try then go through all of our findings. We do an interview with the client, right? We kind of run them through a little bit of an interview that goes over like, CIS, IG1, implementation group 1, just to see where their policies, procedures, insurance, all those things live. We'll pull the top 5 or so findings out. Like these are your biggest risks, and then we'll give recommendations to address each of those risks, right? So it's like at the end of this, we produce an 8 to 10 page document with 3,000 pages of supporting evidence, and that 8 to 10 page document is very actionable. They can take it to their existing provider, right? There's nothing secret about it. It's like, here are the problems. Here's how you fix them.
Right. Now, is that also, so in doing that, and let's say now you win over the client, you're then during the onboarding process, you're remediating and fixing all of those issues that you found.
Yep. So some of them will get lumped into the onboarding project. Some of them will get lumped into the remediation project, right? Like, and it sometimes becomes the case where the client doesn't have budget to handle everything at once, right? So we kind of figure out, okay, well, these ones are non-negotiable, like for us to engage with you, these ones have to be fixed. Right. But we can put a plan in for these other remaining ones. Right? Like sometimes, like I can't require a client to completely change their line of business software, right? Like to onboard with me. But, okay, well, the line of business software is still running on 2K8R2. Okay, we need to get with the vendor to find out if we can, right? So you end up running through, okay, well, I'm going to lull guard in that, so I can't talk to anything, right? Like, or another good example, a client runs a Sonic wall, right? Like we don't, I'm not a huge fan of Sonic wall. I kind of hate it.
Nope, we're not either. Well,
if it's under subscription and it's under a service, say it's got like 2 years of the security service left on it, we'll leave that go. We'll let it live the remaining 2 years, right? We won't renew it, but we don't need to immediately replace it.
Right. That. No, I get it. I mean, I guess I equate it to this because I just have to as a sales guy, I have to wrap my head around it. It's where, you don't just go to a surgeon and they do the surgery, right? They are going to run they're going to do an MRI. They're going to do a CAT scan. They're going to run tests that are all things you're going to, or your insurance is going to pay for, right? Prior to even that happening and evaluating what they're going to do in surgery. So I can kind of equate it to that because it's an important aspect of what's happening and how, because and we run our stacks a little differently. So I get a lot of what you were doing within your thing. So, I know I'm not going to win this argument of no, just quote the MSP and like, let's get moving on. Pros and cons, I guess pros and cons. And when you think about that, you at one point you didn't do them. And at some point you decided to do it. So walk through that.
Yeah. So what we found a couple of things, right? Like when the client has no skin in the game, 2 things happen, right? One, they don't take you seriously. Right. Like they're like, oh yeah, I'll give them time. You don't ever get any time out of them. And they don't take what you're asking them to do seriously. When suddenly they're spending money to do it, they want to get their money's worth out of it. So they're willing to give you more time. Right. So that piece of it's definitely been the case. And, I find, our assessments for, small network, they start at like 1,500, right? Like I'm not making money. These they're intended to break even, right? Or maybe make a tiny bit of money. I find that if a customer is unwilling to pay for $1,500 assessment, the chances of you selling them a $1,500 to $2,000 a month managed service agreement are near zero.
It's not going to happen. Yeah, they're just not going to do it. I guess it's a good indicator to figure out if you're wasting your time even trying to quote the project or quote the managed services.
I mean, I'll pull up. We've got a couple of them open or that recently closed, right? And we're spending. Let me look at this one runner right now. Yeah, I mean, I've got 20 hours into this assessment we're doing right now for a client.
Wow.
Right? These aren't things that are happening in like an hour or two. So we're actively running right now. It's 20 hours into it.
Well, and based on a $1,500 kitty on that, you're losing money.
I mean, we're not losing money, but we're not making money for sure, right? Like again, these aren't I won't say loss leader because my goal is to not lose money on them. But yeah, they're definitely not intended to be money makers. And so we estimate that on a 20 user network, it's going to take us 10 hours to do it. And so we price it at $150 an hour, essentially. Sometimes we win, and there's another recent one. We did it in 8, right? So we won a little bit there, and maybe made a little bit of money, right? But then here's the other one that I was just talking about. We estimated that was going to take 10 hours, and it's definitely not at 10 hours. It's definitely at 21 hours right now. Yeah. So I mean, sometimes you lose them. It just kind of happens that way.
It's but I guess you get a clearer picture of what you're truly, to be able to do for that client. It's you go to some of these managed service websites, and we create a custom package for you, but yet they're giving it to everybody. They're not even they're giving the same thing to everyone, and they're not doing assessments. How can they be custom, right? And that's and Matt and your Matt gave me that argument of how can I say I'm doing a custom fit for you when it's just cookie cutter.
We all say custom, and we are to a certain extent, right? Like I'm working my way through They Ask, You Answer right now, which I think Tom just read too. He was talking to us about it in the channel we shared.
He reads books fast, doesn't he?
Oh my, holy crap! Yeah, that was quick. Because I'm not even done with it yet, and he's already done with it. Right. But I'm listening to it. Problem there is that, it's easy to go, these things are all custom, but they're less custom than I think we all delude ourselves into believing.
Yeah.
Right. So there is a certain custom aspect to it, but the reality of it is, from my perspective, there's 2 choices right now. Like, we are starting to do some amount, 3, co-managed, right? And then whether or not you have SOC on my side is a choice you can make, right? Whether or not you need 24/7 security operations center coverage, or you're okay with just an on-call engineer getting paged. And then, the last choice is whether or not labor is included. Because we do have a couple where they're more like your model, where it's like, they pay us for management, and then all labor is time and materials, with the exception of we do require them to pre-approve labor to remediate immediate issues, right?
Right. I think you need to, because that's an important. Why am I? Because then ultimately what happens is, why am I paying for this? They get an invoice. We get that once in a while. I'm sure you still get that.
We do. But so they're really not that custom, right? Like, it's so what's custom is the pricing varies depending on the complexity of, at least the perceived complexity of the network, right? So, we have some wiggle room, 20% up or down that will go on our pricing depending on
how many VLANs they have, or where they've split the network, how many locations, things like that. Yeah.
Just generally what we find in assessment, right? Like, is this network a dumpster fire? Okay, we probably need to be a little bit higher on our cost, because we're going to take a lot of labor. Because wow, we're running really long. You and I have talked about this, right? Like, labor is the most expensive component of all of this. Right. So on my side, where I'm not billing time and material for all the work, right? Like, I need to make sure that I have budgeted enough labor into the managed services cost to be able to be whole at the end of the day. Sometimes I get it wrong. I definitely have a couple customers that are not super profitable because we got it wrong. And guess what? Several of them were ones where the sales guy successfully convinced me that we did not need to do an assessment because of that.
All right, don't take me there. Do not take me there. That's not fair. No. So I think last question, though, I think we can wrap this up. Who does the assessment? Is it a split? Is it what's so? Because when I think of a sales process, that sales guy's involved in, through the end to close, right?
Yes. So
who's doing that assessment?
So typically it's a fork, right? So I will have the sales resource conduct the staff interviews.
Okay.
Sometimes with the technical resource shadowing him, right? But it's a lifecycle insights assessment we're doing, so pretty easy. The sales guy can run through it, right? Like, and as a matter of fact, it ends up being the same assessment we use during the KR process further later, right? So we can baseline with here's where you normally started, and we can show the journey, right? Like we can't do it all at once typically, but we can show the
Mm-hmm.
journey as they mature and they get better, and the clients
Right.
love to see that. As far as the technical resources go, myself or Matt right now typically do the Nessus game, and then so we'll do the scans
Mm-hmm.
because that's where the Nessus is licensed, just to me and Matt.
Right.
So we'll do the scans and then we'll collect the results. We'll pull them to Plex Track, and I've had my recently the tier 2 or tier 3 guys are actually writing the report, and then Matt or I will proof them before we send them to the client. One of the nice things about using Plex Track to do this is we've built up like a narrative library, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like instead of writing it once, we a
It's your own chat
recommendation for
GPT.
yeah, a recommendation for implementing MFA. We've written that, right? So you can just drag it into the report. You don't have to write it again from the beginning. So the actual reporting piece of it, because we're using that, has gone from like 4 or 5 hours to write the report to like an hour and a half, and then like another half hour for Matt or I to proof it, edit it, and get it out.
Right. No, I get it. It's that it. I'm still kind of trying to figure in my sales head. I'm trying to figure out, is there an easier way to incorporate or do this, or is there something that would be, well, we can do a scan, and then we quote, and then we include in that quote with the onboarding that, yeah, we're gonna have to fix some things. And so I guess through my head I'm trying to figure that out, and some of you guys might be on Jason's camp, and some of you might be over here with me wondering what should I do. And I think that's why we have these discussions, right? It's about figuring out what you should do. But I lean more towards what Jason's saying in this, because it's we've seen that, and I'm sure you have too. Not doing an assessment for somebody, you've seen the issues that can arise from that, and then it just becomes a bottleneck in the back end of things, and maybe not the best customer experience. All about customer experience, right? How's that flow when you say you're going to do something and then you do it, and then, oh, by the way, I think I got to sell you another $10,000 worth of equipment because all your stuff sucks.
Yeah, and that's the other half of the problem, right? Is that I sell a managed
Right.
services agreement, and then they're like, "Well, I don't have the money to do all this other like work." So then
Right.
I essentially have to live with it then, right? Like, and it's I'm tired, and that's I talk about the ones where we haven't done assessments where sometimes we're losing money. Or breaking even. Sometimes we're losing money or breaking even because I end up having to live with something the client can't afford to replace that I would have been part of the initial quote is a non-negotiable had I done an assessment.
And then they would have to know the plan for that and budget that in
correct.
Q3, Q4, whatever it might be. Yeah.
Yeah. I
No,
mean,
I
after
get
the
it.
sales process is done, it becomes a lot. I mean, I do have the right to beat on the client contractually, but like, man, I don't want to go there.
I get it. I totally
Everyone
get
loses. When one of us is looking at the contract, everyone's already lost.
I agree. And even if you mention the contract, I think you've got a lost leader there. Well, heck, I think we've gone well over this longest one we've done. But I think it's important because, in essence, I'm asking the question because I need to understand more. You think of it and what's my sales talk path going to be on something like this, and how could I coach others to have that talk path so that there's a more a higher close ratio in just the assessment. Because I think if you do the assessment quick, we're going to go longer here. I got to ask another question. If you do an assessment, what is your close ratio after assessment?
It's pretty good. We've had very few that get to the point of assessment and then walk away. So if you can close the assessment, I would say 60+% of them close the managed services deal. There are some where, and usually the ones that don't, we know that they're not likely to going into it, right? So they have existing IT, and they're doing an audit or whatever, right? So we know that they're probably just going to take our findings back to the existing IT company. You know what? I don't really care, right? They're paying me to do the work. Maybe I price it slightly higher if I know that because I want to make money on it instead of it being more of a break-even aspect. But the close rate is definitely a lot higher in that case.
Oh, I would imagine so, because you've already built trust and shown where they're. It's kind of like when you sell an insurance policy, you sell for the need, right? You're looking at going, boy, And back in the days of insurance, I would find people were so undercovered. Oh, it was
Mhm.
terrible. Nowadays, it's not that way. Actually, it's actually kind of neat to see that insurance agents are actually doing their job,
Yeah,
and
I,
IT
I have
people
an
are doing
umbrella
their job.
policy. Yeah,
What?
I have an umbrella policy now, which I didn't even know was a
Yeah.
thing until my most recent insurance agent. They're like, "Yeah, let's cover you here, 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 and here, and add like this $2 million umbrella policy
It's the
because it's not
cheapest
that
$2 million
expensive."
you'll pay for.
Yeah, and it
It is
covers
truly.
everything. There's a gap. Like that sounds great.
Mhm.
So,
It does. It
but
Umbrella's
yeah,
over. I love an umbrella. I've always carried what we call a PUP, personal umbrella
yeah,
policy, and yep, totally get it. All right. Final thought is, I guess you have to make the choice best for your business.
yeah,
But in this talk, I hope it gave you an idea of how you can go and move forward if you're going to plan to do assessments on every client. Hey, leave comments and below. Reach out to us. I think my LinkedIn URL. I'm at Brett Chittum at Twitter. Ask us questions at Jason Slagle. So it's reach out to us. Hey, we'd love to talk to people.
yeah. I mean, if you'd
Really,
like us to do more of a deeper dive into the sales aspect of this, I've had to drive that from my side. I'm willing to have it if people want to hear it. If not, then we'll move on to another topic next week. Just let us know in the comments.
absolutely. Moving on and having a great rest of the week. Everybody enjoy.
Yeah. See you later.